Hi, I'm Vicky Payne and I'm veterinary consultant for Oscars and Breakthrough, and in this video we'll be looking at how you can muzzle train your dog. Before we start muzzle training our dog here, we're going to have a little think about the reasons that a dog might need to wear a muzzle. Obviously muzzles have been in the paper quite a lot recently because of the changes in legislation on ownership of XL bully type dogs, and if they've been exempted they have to wear a muzzle when they're in public, and that includes out on walks and even in the car. Other dogs might be wearing muzzles because they eat stuff they shouldn't. It can be, I often use muzzles with my reactive dog clients because these dogs, they're probably not going to bite, or they're not going to mean to bite, but their owners are always worried that the dog's going to potentially lunge at another dog and bite, or potentially bite a person, and they can actually feel more relaxed with a muzzle on their dog, so they know their dog can't do any harm, and then their dog feels more relaxed because their handler feels more relaxed. Obviously when I'm in the veterinary clinic we use muzzles quite a lot because we're doing stuff to dogs that they don't like. Now from my point of view, I think all dogs and puppies should learn to wear a muzzle. It shouldn't be a big deal for them. A lot of dogs don't like muzzles, and the reason is that you've had a stressed dog in the vet. Maybe the dog's already snapped at the vets, and then the vets tried to wrestle a muzzle onto their face while they were really angry and scared, and then the next time they see a muzzle all they're thinking is, wow, that got put on my face, I didn't like it, and then somebody did stuff to me that I didn't appreciate. So it's not then surprising that dogs build a bad association with the muzzle. But as I say, there's lots of reasons that your dog may need to wear one, either long or short term. Occasionally I've had to use these on patients when they're recovering from surgery because they just won't stop chewing their bandages or licking at their wounds. That's really not ideal, but sometimes that's the only method that we can use. So I get all my dogs used to wearing muzzles. All my dogs will wear muzzles. When I explain how we muzzle train them, you'll see why, although most of my dogs haven't worn a muzzle, they're all quite happy to do so. Before we get on to muzzle training, I'm going to talk a little bit about types of muzzle. There's two main types of muzzle that you can get. There are this sort of fabric sleeve muzzle. You can see the nose goes through here, and then we do that up around the back of the dog's head. Actually, secret she might show us. So yeah, it goes on the dog's nose like so, and then fastens up round the back of the head. Now, these type of muzzles are not the sort of muzzle that you would use for exercising your dog in, for travelling them in a vehicle, anything like that. They are really short-term muzzles. I do quite like using them in the vet because they're quite easy to get on. They fold up nice and small, so these are great for me to take out in a visit bag. But they don't allow the dog any room to pant. The dog can't open their mouths, and the dog can actually still nip you. Obviously they can't open their mouth very wide and give you a good bite, but if their little snout is sticking out the end here, they can give you a nasty nip. So these are useful, but they're definitely an emergency short-term type of muzzle rather than something that you would want to use for any length of time. The type of muzzle that we're going to wear for a little bit longer is a basket type of muzzle. This is really common. This is a Baskerville Ultra, and most vet practices will use basket type muzzles of this type. This one is quite nice because you can feed treats in through the end. That's definitely something to think about when you're buying a muzzle. And it has a nice opening here for the nose, the dogs can breathe freely. These are okay for medium term use, so a short walk, maybe a short trip in the car, definitely for vet use. But again, they're not ideal for exercise because, as you can see, it doesn't allow very much room for the dog's mouth to open and for them to pant, or indeed for them to be sick if they were travelling in the car. So if we're thinking about a muzzle that we want to exercise a dog in, then again, this probably wouldn't be ideal, but these are cheap and common, and they're great for doing your muzzle training with, and then you can invest in a better muzzle for exercise. I don't have an example of an exercise muzzle. There are plenty of examples if you have a look round, but an exercise muzzle is quite different in shape. Kind of will come down much further and then often come back in a sort of triangle shape like this to allow the dog plenty of room to pant. If you look at the types that are sold for racing greyhounds and whippets, obviously those dogs pant when they're running and wear a muzzle. So they have these much bigger box muzzles. Luckily now, with more dogs sadly requiring muzzles, there are many more types of muzzle on the market. Most are made out of these sort of mouldable thermoplastics, and the advantage with these is if they don't fit your dog perfectly, if you pop them in some warm water, you can often stretch them and change the shape slightly to fit your dog's face. There are some companies that will make you made to measure muzzles out of leather or out of thick biothane. I think an important thing to say is that no muzzle is completely bite proof, and so you've still got to take care around a muzzled dog. You've still got to take precautions. They're also, I mean, they're not entirely eating things proof. This type of muzzle a dog would be able to drink in. A lot of the exercise muzzles they'd be able to drink in. They can certainly try and, we can feed treats in through here, that's one of the points, but they can certainly try and eat things they shouldn't. So this should just be like a security measure. It's not going to make either the dogs perfectly safe either from eating things they shouldn't, or potentially from biting. I mean, also I should say I have been attacked by a dog in a muzzle, or my dogs have, and some dogs learn to be quite naughty and just bash the muzzle into other dogs, which obviously isn't a bite, but it can leave a nasty bruise. It can be quite painful. Extra security features on muzzles, especially if you are using them on a dog that by law has to wear one. It's great if your muzzle will attach to the collar, so this muzzle has a piece here so you can put the collar through, so the dog is less likely to pull off. And this also has an extra strap which will go over the top of the head and can be used to secure the muzzle better on the head, because some of the really round-headed dogs, our bully type breeds, are quite difficult to get a muzzle that stays on. So take a bit of time. When you're training, use any type of muzzle. It doesn't really matter as long as it's comfortable for the dog. When you're looking for something longer term, yeah, look for something that's comfortable for the dog, that they can pant, dribble, vomit, eat and drink in, but also is nice and secure and is not going to come off if the dog paws. So now we come to the section where we're actually going to do some muzzle training, and you can see Secret looks quite excited at this prospect, and that's because we've got out some treats. So like any training, it's going to be reward based, treat based training. Now just a word, if you are using Breakthrough Startup, then you can either use some of the food at their meal times for training, and that's absolutely fine. If your dog enjoys eating his Breakthrough, then you can feed him bits of that. If you're training between meal times, then make sure that you only use the Breakthrough Train Up treats, because other treats will interfere in how the food works. If your dog's eating any of the Oscar's foods, then use whatever treats you like. So I've got here some dog safe peanut butter. As you can see, that is always a popular choice. And I've got some other little treats cut up into chunks here. I don't have any train up treats with me today. I'm also got my clicker. My dogs do know a little bit of clicker training. If you haven't used a clicker, you can use a marker word. So the advantage of the clicker is that it makes a really short sound. So when we're charging up the clicker, we would do 10 quick click, give the dog a treat. Dog very quickly learns that that means a treat is coming, and it allows you to build a little bit of delay into your training. But if you don't have a clicker, or you haven't got enough hands, and that can become a problem with muzzle training, is having enough hands, then you can absolutely just use a word. A nice short word like yes or good is fantastic for that. And obviously, as we move down the line, we might give the actual muzzle wearing itself a word. So we might say muzzle, we might say something silly like party hat or nose cone. It doesn't really matter, but it lets our dogs know what's going to go on. So let's get on to some muzzle training. Now, the reason that my dogs don't generally get formally muzzle trained is because of yogurt pots. I didn't have a yogurt pot today, but we've got a coffee cup. And especially if your dog's had a bad experience, get out of the peanut butter. Especially if your dog's had a bad experience with muzzles in the past, then starting with something different can help. So a yogurt pot with some holes in the bottom, a coffee cup with some holes in the bottom, and you can just place a treat into the bottom of there and wait for your dog to stick her nose in, nom, 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 to get the treat. I mistimed my clicking a bit there. What we should get, hang on, yeah, nose in, click, treat. Then what we would want is for her to shove her nose in without a treat in there. You see she's getting a treat each time. And then I might just wait. She's just going to cheat. I might wait for a slightly longer nose touch in the cup. Don't cheat. Secret. She says not for no treats. So ideally build this up in stages, but you're going from the nose going in for a second to the nose staying in the cup for a couple of seconds. At some point, she's desperate to get the peanut butter. That's going to be a popular choice. At some point, you're going to move on to your actual muzzle. So once your dog is quite happy to poke their nose into a pot to get some treats, I say mine are used to licking out yogurt pots in the morning, so that's quite usual for them. You're going to want to introduce the muzzle. Now, Secret has no particular bad associations with muzzles, so I'm not going to be too worried about this. But imagine she did, or she's never seen one before. The first stage is that we're just going to introduce the muzzle and click and give her a treat for being in the vicinity of the muzzle. Secret. So we might show it to her. She's totally uninterested in the muzzle. Good girl. She just wants a treat. She's not bothered. I mean, I can put it by her head. I can move it around her. She's not bothered. So we might spend a little bit of time just getting the dog used to being in the presence of the muzzle. There's then a couple of ways that you can work at this. If you're really into your clicker training and shaping your dog, you can just hold the muzzle, get all the strappy bits out the way, and you can just wait for your dog to choose to do something with the muzzle. So she might of her own accord choose to pop her nose near the muzzle. I don't think Secret's going to do this. She might. No, she's just more interested in the clicker and the hand with treats in. But we might get her to do it. No? No, my dogs are not super good at thinking for themselves, it must be said. But if you had a dog that's really good at shaping and investigating new objects, they might be interested in putting their nose towards it, and then you can click and treat for that. I'm a bit lazy, so I tend to do it the quicker way. So I am going to, this peanut butter that she's desperate to get, we are going to put a little bit of peanut butter in the end of the muzzle. Nice. This is people peanut butter, so I can have some too. Secret. What's in there? In there? And she's obsessed with the clicker. Good girl. Oh yeah, she's discovered it now. And this is quite nice because you can actually keep their face in there for quite a while as they have a little lick. We would then probably move on to not having, this is where I'm going to abandon my clicker because I run out of hands. But we're then going to present the muzzle with our treat on the other side of it. Good girl. Muzzle. Good. See if we can give her the treat. And you'd build up with a dog that had never had a muzzle on before. Crazy thing. Good girl. Good girl. You would build up from literally them just popping their nose in the end of the muzzle to holding their nose in there for a period of time. Once you've gone through those steps, and this would take days at least for most dogs, rather than trying to do it in a 5-minute training session. But 5 minutes a day, 4 or 5 times a week is absolutely fine to get them muzzle trained. Most dogs that haven't had a bad experience will pick it up really quick. So the next part then is going to be attaching the strap round the neck, and I have found this is a problem for some dogs. So with attaching the neck strap, I found some of my client dogs have a problem with this. They don't like the action of their owners coming over their heads. So they've got their nose in the muzzle. They potentially feel vulnerable, and then somebody's trying to do this around their head. Obviously with a floofy dog like Secret, we've got these ears getting in the way, and if a dog's got sore ears, or some of these XLs have got cropped ears, maybe badly illegally cropped ears, they might be sensitive around their heads. So I have introduced an extra stage in my muzzle training, which is to forget about the muzzly bit and just get the dog putting their heads through the loop. So ideally for this you want a buckle one rather than one with a sliding type of fastening. But all we're going to do, again, you could just hold it and let the dog, if you're really into your clicker training, just let them investigate and reward them for getting their nose closer and closer. I am a lazy trainer, so I'm going to lure my dog through. So I've got my loop and she's just putting her nose through to get the treat. Good girl. It's very similar if you've ever done training for putting your dog's collar on or putting a harness on. It can be very similar training. Good girl. It's also how I train all my dogs to wear the cone of shame, is that I'll just lure them through and then they're like, yay, I have my cone of shame on and I got a treat. Okay, so from there we have the dog happy to have the muzzle hanging around her neck. We'll make it a little bit smaller. I will point out this muzzle is a little bit big for Secret. It's just the one that I happen to have. So now I've got it closer to the size that she will need. Secret! She's loving the treats. So again, head through the loop. We've got that part on. She gets a treat. Then we can bring the muzzle up onto her face. Again, we're still rewarding her with a treat there. And this is slightly difficult one-handedly. But you see there that I'm able to slide that buckle and do it up on her face. Okay, so now we have the dog with the muzzle actually on her face. This one has this annoying head strap, which we can click on there. And as you see, it is a little bit big for her, but she'll happily wear it because, you know, I'm going to keep giving her treats. So I'll just try and get, so you can see there, secret in the muzzle. Not ideal, this one, because it will push up into her eyes. But she still doesn't care. Good girl. And then we take it off before she gets annoyed. Good girl, Secret. What a good girl. Yeah, she says, I'm free, I'm free. The final stage. So obviously we've got our dog happy to have the muzzle put on at this stage, and that's great. We've now got to build up how long they will wear it, because it's quite easy. For me in the veterinary clinic, I need a muzzle on for a minute or two so that I can give an injection or do a bit of an examination. Obviously, if dogs are going to have to wear them on walks, they have to get used to that. And most of them don't love them, and most of them will try to pull the muzzles off their faces to start with. So we're going to start at home. We're going to pop the muzzle on for a bit of watching TV, a bit of grooming, just a bit of hand feeding, anything the dog likes really. We could pop the muzzle on and feed part of their food through it. Then we could start having the muzzle on and maybe doing some little recalls. So I quite like when I'm teaching things like hold to my dog, for them to hold toys, I'll sit them up and just ask them to recall a couple of steps. No reason that you can't do that with the muzzle as well, just to get them used to moving with the muzzle on. So we'll just pop this one back on Secret a second. She really does not mind being muzzled because she's a very strange creature. There we go. Do that up. Do that up. So here we can just move her about. She'll go off camera a little bit. Good girl. Secret here is just getting used to. So I can walk with a muzzle on. Yay, good girl. Can I get it in? Well done. Good girl. So some little recalls, the sort of heel work practice you might practice with a puppy at home. Do that with your muzzle on. Some other fun things people have done, if you find posting the treats in a little bit difficult, then sometimes a stick with some peanut butter on the end might be more useful. You might be able to hold that by the hole. This hole's designed so that they can get their little licky tongue out of there. That might be easier for them to do. Tubes of squeezy cheese. Obviously, if you're having to use a train up treats, that won't work, but I'm a big fan of tubes of squeezy cheese. You can also get liver paste in a tube, and those might be easier for you to squeeze for your dog to lick when they're wearing a muzzle. But make sure they're comfortable with that before they go out in public. So that they can feel relaxed and not be stressed out by the muzzle. The more times you can put it on either in a neutral situation or a fun situation, the more your dog is going to see a muzzle as a great thing and not as an awful thing. I always think about, I've got friends that raise whippets and lurchers, and their dogs love to have a muzzle on because for them the muzzle means running, it means chasing things, it means freedom, it means having a great time. Obviously in the vets I see dogs that are like, muzzle, that means stuff's going to happen to us. But with the right introduction, then a muzzle can just be another piece of kit, and a very handy piece of kit too.